hour of convening is essentially come and gone. So I think we call this full meeting of the Ways and Means Committee to order. We have several first readers today, and I'm proud to announce this is indeed the 20th day, so there's some urgency about dealing with some of these. And I had one request of a representative that is to be in two places at once, and even he may not be able to accomplish that feat. So we would like to recognize Representative Franklin. Please, sir, if you, on a first reader for House Bill 1180, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I know we're all really appreciative of our law enforcement community in the state. They do a tremendous job protecting us and protecting good order throughout the state. We see tragedies all the time. There's one in Fulton County recently where an officer was ambushed. House Bill 1180 does one thing. It exempts the income from income tax from public safety officers that serve and protect the people of this state. I appreciate your favorable considerations that moves through the process.
We certainly look forward to spirited debate on this idea, and we appreciate you bringing it to us and informing the committee. And
thank you.
Hopefully, you'll be able to get a subcommittee hearing set up pretty expeditiously on something this important. It's going to be assigned to our income tax subcommittee. And chairman, we have 3 chairmen, so we usually can find somebody that can set up a hearing for you that's not otherwise somewhere else. That would be Chairman Mills, Chairman Peak, or Chairman Knight, if you'll contact either of those 3 gentlemen. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else on a first reader basis that has to be somewhere else that's in a hurry that needs to go right away? Okay, is Representative Lucas here? Okay, he's trying to get him. Representative, what an honor it is to have one of our own actually come to a meeting. Representative Roberts, this is just a really great day for us to see you down there. And I'm sorry if I woke you up, but what number are you? We'll let you tell us about 27? Okay. How about tell us about House Bill 1186, please, sir, as briefly as you can.
1186 at 1135.
That's your second reader. You have a first reader on 1186. I know how busy you stay, and you probably
I'm
don't.
sorry there, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. I thought you was calling the other bill. I apologize. Yes, I did. House Bill 1186 is pretty simple bill. It's talking about the P3 partnerships that we've approved. It allows that when the department enters into one of those public-private partnerships with a private entity, that the ad valorem taxes wouldn't have to be paid for that section of that highway once that contract was entered into, even though it was a private company. The cities and counties really wouldn't be losing any money, because if the state ended up owning that highway, they would be exempt from ad valorem taxes anyway. And this is just seeking to help with the public-private partnerships that we're looking at developing throughout the state.
Thank you, sir. We'll assign that, since it has to do with ad valorem tax, we'll assign it to that subcommittee, and hopefully you'll be able to get a hearing pretty quickly. That'd be Chairman Peak, Chairman Roger Williams, or Chairman David Knight can arrange a hearing for you on that very important matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Knight, you're where here? 21. Recognize to tell the committee about House Bill 1190, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a pleasure to bring this bill. It was something that has been going on for a while as we've debated the property tax and valuation issues, and we've still got some of those issues before the committee. But one of the things that I had noticed last year in our debate and in the public and answering constituent questions was that the transparency of this process was not completely there, and that as people look at their property tax return and get to that final bill of what that property tax would be for that year, they really didn't understand that it was a two-part equation. That being the valuation, the assessed value times the millage rate. And everybody seems to forget that the millage rate is a part of that equation that gets us to the final tax. So what I've tried to do here is put in some transparency language or attempt to that would alert our citizens to know that there are two parts to the property tax, the valuation side of it and the millage side of it. And I know that this bill is not perfected, and just trying to make sure that we had this entered by the 20th day, and I look forward to working with the committee to perfect this, to perfect this language.
We thank you for that, and we will assign that to our ad valorem tax subcommittee. And you know who they are. Representative Glanton with us there. If you recognize, please, sir, to tell us about your House Bill 1197.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bring to the committee today House Bill 1197, which is basically an tax, hotel motel tax, excise tax for the city of Morrow. We did receive a resolution, a unanimous resolution from the City Council of the City of Morrow, as well as this is being requested by the mayor of the City of Morrow. And basically what this allows the City of Morrow to do is, like we're encouraging every other government here within the state, is to find ways to generate revenue within your jurisdictions and not be so dependent on the state to do those things. So this will allow them to not only to promote tourism and conventions and trade shows, but it'll give them opportunity to do some marketing as well for the City of Morrow and their tourism authority.
Okay, we're going to assign that to our Public Finance Subcommittee, Representative Glanton, and that would, you'd think after a while I'd remember who's on which subcommittees, but that would be Chairman Chuck Martin, Chairman Tom Rice, or Chairman David Knight can arrange a subcommittee hearing for you at your convenience and one of theirs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Wow, what an honor it is to have my seatmate here with us today. Really mean that. One of the finest ladies I know in the Capitol, Chairman Judy Manning.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, thank you and your committee for taking on an effort to get a bill 1198 put in a subcommittee, I assume. This is a deferred tax bill trying to get some income, generate some income for the state of Georgia. And that's basically what it does. Looking for some retirement income after somebody retires from a major corporation and then moves to another state and recapture that income.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
Probably need to turn that down a little bit. Okay, we look forward to spirited debate on that proposition, and that's going to go into our income tax subcommittee, and that would be Chairman James Mills, Chairman Alan Peake, or Chairman David Knight. Either of those three gentlemen can arrange a hearing for you.
I look forward to it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Manning. Chairman Ron Stevens, are you with us? Yes, sir. Which number there? 26. 26. Tell us about, if you would, please, sir, House Bill 1202.
Mr. Chairman, 1202 is has to do with unused income tax credit for donated property on conservation purposes, how it could be transferred or sold, basically.
Okay, we're going to assign that one to our income tax subcommittee, and I look forward to seeing what your ideas are there. You want to go ahead and be recognized for House Bill 1203 as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 1203, as you might remember, last year we had some conversations with, at the time, the Chairman of the Rules Committee, which had a bill that eliminated the unincorporated franchise fees. This essentially puts it into the conversation for the service delivery strategy so that the cities will still collect it but reimburse the counties for that franchise fee. It will generate some attention, yes, sir.
I would imagine so. Do you have Kevlar for the meetings?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to apologize to the Public Finance Subcommittee. That's where that's going to be assigned, and maybe we can get seating against the wall for everybody. Chairman Stevens, would you tell us about House Bill 1204, please?
1204 has to do with income tax credit for bona fide job creation, real similar to pieces of the bill that we had last year that was vetoed. But if you're it's to stimulate job creations. If you create jobs that are 35 hours a week, a minimum $20,000 a year, this essentially would create an income tax credit for those job creators.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing more about that one. It's going to help us create jobs, which we desperately need. Thank the gentleman for bringing it. That'll be in the Income Tax Sales Subcommittee. Representative Carl Epps, are you with us, please, sir? Carl Epps. Okay. He has House Bill 1213, which is LaGrange County Hotel Motel Tax, which I will assign to the Public Finance Subcommittee. If you would, somebody in the committee get him notice that that's where that matter has gone to, and he can arrange a hearing when he wishes. He also will assign House Bill 1214 of Representative Carl Von Epps about Troup County excise tax to the same subcommittee. Chairman Martin with us? Sir. Did I see you come in? Yes, sir. You're recognized, please, to tell the committee about your House Bill 1216.
Yes, sir. House Bill 1216 simply seeks to open up a discussion for the purposes of resetting the rates that are charged to the citizens of Georgia and paid to the citizens of Georgia for refunds owed the state or refunds owed back to the customer. Currently, that's set at 1% per month, and that's just not reflective of the current cost of funds in the country. There exists a situation where someone can actually overpay the state in taxes if they so choose, and fully be able to seek a refund at some time in the future and let the state serve as a bank. Now, I'm not sure that people are doing that, but I've heard that that could be gamed and done, and we just think it's fair to have a discussion about perhaps setting those at a more reasonable rate, or maybe even a discussion about pegging them to some sort of prime rate, and would like to have that discussion. We think that could actually save the state money over time. They're paying too much interest.
I absolutely agree. I'd love to be getting 12% guaranteed interest in today's world.
Yes, sir. If I had money to deposit with the state and get that, I'd do it, but I don't.
Well, we look forward to the debate on that. That'll go into our public finance, and I'm certainly glad the gentleman has brought that. If we could recognize you, please, Chairman Martin, for House Bill 1217.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I bring this back, and I know in this time there's probably not out to move on additional sales tax exemptions, but just to point out again to the legislature, and I know the chair is aware of this, that there's somewhat of a disparity when the legislation was passed to take tax off food for home consumption, that one can buy a 20-ounce Coke in a grocery store, and it's not taxed because it's assumed to be for home construction, or consumption, not construction. It is not taxed if bought, say, through the aisle in the grocery store, but it is, in fact, taxed if it's bought in a vending machine right beside that. So just bring that out for a point. I know in this budgetary climate we're not apt to extend that exemption to vending machines, but it is a disparity that exists, and I thought it was worth bringing forward to have us make note of that.
And that will be assigned to our sales tax subcommittee for further handling. We have one first reader for Representative Lucas. You're easy to look over because you always look so comfortable. You never look in a hurry. But could you come up and tell us briefly about your House Bill 1167 as a first reader, and we'll get it assigned to subcommittee for you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's not something that a lot of folks are in favor of, especially my colleagues as well as the majority party. But let me just give you why I brought the bill up. As we look at our revenue projections, as we go. We've gotten figures of 1.2 billion to 2 billion. My estimation is we'll be $3 billion in the hole by the end of the fiscal year. This is a growing state. As we look at the census and the projections, Georgia is projected to pick up 2 congressmen. That means we have a growing population. But at the same time, we are scuffling with the same thing that every state in the union is suffering with. And I would not say that it's because of Georgia's fault. I think it stems from the federal government on down. They have a printing press and we don't. But when we look at the so-called furlough of teachers and state employees, I do not call that a furlough. I call that a pay decrease. That's a cut in the paycheck. As we look at education, if you looked at what Fulton County and the city schools of Atlanta did, they did not furlough teachers. They paid them. What we have to look at is when you talk about a furlough, everybody doesn't teach school. If there's 2 parents in the household, they are working. You furlough, somebody's got to stay home with the kid or they got to pay somebody. A single parent has to pay somebody to stay home off from work. 1167 does one thing. It raises the state sales tax by 1 penny. It has a sunset on it for 3 years. Now, a penny we consider to bring in about $1.2 billion. Over a 3-year period, that would bring in $3.6 billion. Now, the intent of it is to go for education purposes, but we all know that you can't dedicate revenue unless you pass a constitutional amendment to do it. But this will alleviate the so-called furloughing of teachers and state employees. And the main thing is we furloughed state auditors with the Department of Revenue, and they are the ones who collect our sales tax and bring the monies into the general coffers. I bring it up because I was part of the discussion and the debate during Governor Zell Miller when we took sales tax off of food. And ladies and gentlemen, it was a partisan issue. It was that we as Democrats were going to give the biggest tax decrease. And basically that was a discussion between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. One of the worst things that's happened is we took it off. Nobody's ever thanked the legislator for sales tax off of food. People say that poor folks don't even pay sales tax on food. They got food stamps. If you go to your convenience stores, the sales tax is being collected but not turned in. Now in the grocery stores, they take the sales tax off of food. But in convenience stores where people go in and day out, spend dollars after dollars, that money, they are charged sales tax on food. And it's not collected. And the reason I bring it up is that we've got to come up with some revenue. That's our biggest problem. We've got to have some revenue to operate state government. It does not operate off water. It operates off money. I had many of my colleagues to talk about, well, you know, we have 6 cent or we have 8 cent in our community. And the reason I said we gave away those opportunities from the state to create the local option sales tax to local communities. We gave away what we had the power to do as far as letting communities do it, but that is how we raise our money.
Mr. Lucas,
Yeah.
This is just a first reader to tell us a little bit about your bill, and if you want it, I think you've got a bill that you'd love to have this committee pass if we have time left. So
Well,
you might
I-
want to cut this
I will cut
soliloquy
this
short.
debate off,
and
but I'm just telling you why I put the bill in,
Oh, okay.
except for public discussion, Mr. Chairman.
We're going to put it in the sales tax subcommittee, and you can have more than all the time you need to just let everybody know about it at that point, because that's what we do in the subcommittees, and we appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll be calling on you in another minute on the bill that you have for vote today. I hope we can get time. I'm going to get off first readers and recognize Representative Holt. Right, and then it'll be Jay Roberts on deck. This is a second reader. Representative Holt, you're recognized to tell the committee about House Bill 1013, please, sir. If you prefer to sit, we can mic you there. If you like it better there, wherever you'd like.
Either's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. House Bill 1013 is a topic brought to me by a constituent The gentleman had simply asked his school board why they didn't publish an annual summary of their East Bluff finances like the counties and cities did. Their answer to him was, well, as far as we're concerned, we're not required. He brought the question to me, and I asked council about it, and they said, indeed, this is oddly a gray area. Probably has to do with the fact that Education Splost was introduced later than it was and separately from the counties and cities. So in any case, all this bill seeks to do is make the reference explicit that the school systems are required to publish that notice just as counties and cities are, and I have handed out a copy of the code section that is referenced. Be glad to take any questions.
Gentlemen, yield to questions. Any member of the committee have any questions? Any member of the committee have any comments on the bill? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? I have a motion, do pass. I have a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, do pass. Please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Unanimously passes. We'll report it to the rules today. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
It's a great honor now for the chair to recognize the Chairman of Transportation. What he done was House Bill 1135. Please, sir.
You got me. There you go. You may not want my mic on. Is that it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring before you today House Bill 1135, which is better known as the accrual accounting bill for DOT. This bill is, while it's complicated in nature, it's pretty simple as to what we're trying to accomplish and get to here. If we go to the accrual accounting method, at the end of the day, what will it allow is the Department of Revenue to, Department of Transportation to put people back to work, will create jobs in your local community, and will also allow us to start building roads again. With the cash basis that's currently being used, projects such as the 14th Street Bridge that we all are so familiar with wouldn't take place today. If we had to have all the money in the bank before we ever started those type of big projects, then they wouldn't ever proceed forward. So what this bill basically allows is for DOT to go back to where they were a couple years ago from the accrual, back to the accrual accounting method from the cash basis. And if you'll look, which was I think in subcommittee, there's some concerns, and if you'll look on page 1, line 18 of the bill, the contract shall terminate absolutely and without further obligation on part of the department at the close of the fiscal year in which it was executed and at the close of each succeeding fiscal year for which it may be renewed and provided. What this says is the department's not obligated more than a year in advance. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that anybody might have. If not, I asked for due pass on the bill.
Yeah, it's a pretty major change in policy.
Yes, sir.
I'm convinced that the gentleman carrying the legislation completely understands it. I'm convinced, I think, that it's certainly in the best interest of our transportation needs. The cash method has hamstrung us in many ways, as I understand it, from the ability to begin projects. Chairman Stevens, I think you were in subcommittee when this was heard. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is very similar to what happened with the Department of Community Health. Of course, whenever you budget for those dollars, whenever they run out, that's whenever you run into the problems, and of course the project stops. So fully in favor. It seamlessly transitions from one project to another, especially as you're planning for future.
I think it's very thoughtful planning, yet it certainly stays within the constitutional boundaries of our
Yes, sir.
not binding the state beyond a year.
That's correct.
15, I've got a question. Is Chairman Martin?
Mr. Chairman, I guess Joe, our attorney's here, he articulated in subcommittee before the vote was taken on the measure that this looked like language that had been taken out of other code sections that had withstood constitutional question before the court, and the court had ruled that it is constitutional. So just to lay that out before the committee today, that our attorney did mention that this had been language that was very similar to that had already been reviewed constitutionally and was according to the Georgia and the U.S. Constitution.
Balanced budget amendment was the word I was looking for, and thank you for sharing that with us. I did not know that, and if it's been through judicial review, that's that much more comfort that we get. 24, who's that? Representative Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Chairman Roberts, I didn't have privy to the discussions of the subcommittee, but I recall recent media discussion about the DOT board taking a posture of going to an accrual accounting method, which had some question from the Attorney General as to its legality. Does this bill effectively address that issue?
Yes, thank you for the question, Representative Flood. Yes, this bill is, you know, in the legislature we would have liked to have been able to act on it ourselves, and the board got a little out in front, and then I think they decided to go back and rescind that vote and allow us to do it legislatively, and this is what this piece of legislation does. It addresses that exact issue.
Right, thank you.
I think in a little more responsible way, too.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because what they did and rescinded actually was tantamount to more debenture, which this is not. This is very much within the guidelines of our constitutional balanced budget amendment. So and I think that's where the difference was.
Correct.
And any further questions for the gentleman, the author of this legislation? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Second.
I have a motion from Representative Peak and a second from Representative Sims. Any further discussion? All in favor of the proposition, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Measure passes unanimously and will be reported to the Rules Committee this afternoon. Thank you very much, Chairman Roberts. And if you need to go, I think you said you had to be somewhere else, so you're excused. Thank you. Representative Bubber Epps, you can come either here or there. And the subcommittee reported out not long ago, hot off the press, so to speak, your House Bill 1041, as I understand it.
Correct, sir.
If you would tell the committee about that, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, this is a bill that'll aid, provide much needed aid to particularly rural counties with large land mass, where the condition now exists that one property owner can virtually hold up the digest. Simply here, it gives us an avenue where taxpayers' appeal rights are still intact. We simply allow the digest to move forward on a timely basis, and at the point in time that the local governments and your school boards feel comfortable that even if appeals are presented, we still have their ability to tax at 85% of the value and move forward with the digest. And that's basically what this does, Mr. Chairman, and we would appreciate a favorable reaction to it.
Representative Epps, if I remember when this was debated in subcommittee, there are some counties to where one or two landowners might very well comprise 5 or 10% of the entire digest. So it's a lot of the large timber counties, and it seemed to you, representing some of those counties, that it was grossly unfair to those particular governmental subdivisions to have their whole digest held up for that percentage when it was just one or two taxpayers that were in an appeal and made it.
It does, sir, and
no certainty for everybody else. And this is essentially what you're trying to fix with this legislation.
Our attempt to fix that, Representative Jackson, who's co-sponsor of this legislation, is now in that predicament as far as his digest being issued under court order. We worked with ACCG on this. They've helped us draft this verbiage and are in full support of the measure.
Any member of the subcommittee that heard this legislation here, Chairman Peake, what are your thoughts on this?
We did hear it, and for a lot of the same reasons you just mentioned, Mr. Chairman. We feel like it was a prudent thing and needed, particularly in a lot of these smaller counties where you do have one landowner that owns more. So I appreciate Representative Epps bringing it forward, and hope that the committee will look favorably upon it.
Any other questions for the author of the legislation from any member of the committee? Any member of the committee wish to be heard on the matter themselves? I don't see any. What are the wishes of the committee? I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion do pass. Please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you very much, Representative Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members.
Have it in the Rules Committee by 5 o'clock this evening. Now, for his second appearance before the committee, the Chair would like to recognize a good friend from Macon, Georgia, Representative Lucas, for a second reader of House Bill 993. Please, sir. If you like there, or if you want to sit, either one, wherever you're most comfortable.
Comfortable standing.
Okay.
I might get slapped sitting down. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, House Bill 993 does one thing in Bibb County, in the city of Macon. It amends what we call the HMT, the Hotel Motel Tax Law. And basically what it does, it says that if your local governments pass a resolution, what we call an ordinance in local government, to up the hotel motel tax for a designated purpose, then you would have to have that resolution. If you had 3 cities within the county, all the governmental entities would have to sign on. Then you would have to come back to the General Assembly to pass a local act. Now, what it is about is that under this current law, after the first 5 pennies, any penny thereafter is split 50%, 50-50 with the marketing arm of that community. We have what we call a convention bureau in Macon, and many other cities or counties have another marketing arm. And the discussion has centered around that 50%. As you know, we've been put in kind of a quagmire in the sense of the state and the budget cuts on the halls of fame in Macon. And we were told by leadership that we needed to kind of come up with some more money to help support those halls of fame. They are closed now. They're not operating all during the week. They are closed 2 or 3 days a week now. Our local government decided that they wanted to up the hotel motel tax to designate that 1 penny, which would mean that we would go from 6 cents to 7 cents. And they passed resolutions to do it, and the local delegation signed on it unanimously to change the law to that extent, whereas that 1 cent, if we were allowed to go to 7 cents, would go to the halls of fame for the operation.
Will the gentleman yield any questions?
I most certainly will.
26, who is that? Chairman Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate very much the halls of fame and what they do for Macon. Back in actually 2 years ago, we did, as you said, we passed House Bill 1168, which was supposed to divide the 50% going to the cities and 50% was supposed to go to the CVBs for marketing. And it seems that this really doesn't stay within that spirit. And I realize that the money's needed. Any comment?
Well, Representative Stevens, your local governments have to agree to do it. Number one, they would have to pass an ordinance to do it. Then it is forwarded to the local delegation. It still takes an act of the General Assembly. For those who question that, the local delegation has to agree to do it. It still has to come back to the General Assembly, and you have to pass a local act. It is not automatic. If they pass an ordinance or resolution to up their sales tax to 1 penny and try to designate it, it is not automatic. It has to come back to the General Assembly, and the local delegation has to agree to do and introduce a local bill for it to come under.
And I appreciate that. We've got another tourism stimulus bill, if you please, that we're going to offer up soon that will offer fractions of a penny that would do specifically that. And I would just hope that we could get your support whenever that comes around, because I truly do want to help those halls of pain.
Well, I would say this to you. I'll be glad to look at it and think about it as soon as we get through with this one. But I understand that bill, and I've kind of looked at it. But one of the things that we are right now in negotiation between the city and the county on another splash, and we can't add anything to that, or else it would be killed. And the thing about it, we're building a courthouse, and they're dealing with recreation on the city. So I don't want to take up your time, but I mean, I just wanted to let you know basically what we are doing under 3.4 in paragraph 4, and we thought that we were the only ones, but we found out there were several other communities either operated under 3.4 or paragraph 4 of that law. But it basically says that under this, to amend the law, you still have to have your local governments all succinctly to pass a resolution to up that hotel motel tax. So if you got 3 cities in a county, and one of the cities does, and the other city doesn't agree to it, then you can't do it. They all must agree based on what the subcommittee did as far as the language change, I think, where we had, they put and, so it said that all of them have to agree to do it. And then you come to the General Assembly and you must pass a local act.
Any further, Chairman Stevens? Chairman Peake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lucas,
Yeah.
again, I want to thank you for your leadership in getting this done. Just a little bit of history for the committee. This has been an issue that the local delegation has discussed at length for the last year or two, and we did come to a resolution unanimously as a local delegation to push this forward. A couple of important points. Let me just make sure we clarify this for the committee. It only affects CVBs that fall under 3.4 or 4 of the paragraph 3.4 or 4 of the code. There are only about 6 to 8 communities that this would affect. I know there's been a lot of discussion from the CVBs that we're opening up the floodgates here to any city or county to make this change, and that is not correct. It only applies to just a limited amount of communities who fall under paragraph 3.44, and as Representative Lucas stated, it would take up resolutions from both the city and the counties and the local delegation moving it forward. So I think it's important for the committee to understand that we are not opening up the floodgates, or this Representative Lucas's bill is not opening up the floodgates. It is simply allowing opportunity for those in paragraph 3.4. Is that not true?
That is true.
And I would ask the committee look favorably upon this. This is a critical need for making it Bibb County to keep these halls open and running. And I appreciate your leadership, Representative Lucas, in doing this.
Chairman Roger Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll follow up on Representative Peake's comments about who it would accommodate, and that was one of my concerns about opening up the door. I realize that what you go through with this, and it requires a local bill, but whether or not the mechanism that's set in place here would allow other communities that are not now eligible to do that, would this open it up for them, for other communities to do?
I want to be honest in answering that. If they fall under 3.4 paragraph 4, and if they get their local government to all succinctly pass a resolution saying the same thing, then it is up to the local delegation of those communities to come back and pass a local act through the General Assembly.
Chairman Sim.
Representative Lucas,
yes.
How's your convention bureau, how is it set up? Is it appointed by your local folks, or is it?
It's basically appointed by the county and the city.
And they would administrate this money then directed through this, the way I understand it.
My understanding is that the money would come in, but then the money would be sent out because that would be a calculation of that particular 1 penny that would be then turned over to run the halls of fame.
But the convention bureau would be the one that would actually administrate this?
Well, I don't think that would be the case because we're right now changing the law right now for the halls of fame to operate under economic development or whatever it is. But that 1 penny would be put in a fund that would be split between those halls of fame. As the current law reads right now, the marketing arm would be the CVB, which meant that then the counties and the cities send the check to the CVB, and then they send out the money because they are the 50%, the marketing arm. That's how it's been working in Macon. We didn't want to change the law because there is another section under the law that you can go under the local option, but then we would have to abolish the ordinances that they are operating under right now, come back, do the ordinance, but then you can't change the law under that particular section because it says after the first 5 penny, anything thereafter is split 50% with the marketing arm of the local community or the CVB. So we amended the section that affected us, and we found out there were several other communities that operated under 3.4. But you have to, as a subcommittee, change the language. Those communities have to agree. So if you got, for instance, the chairman of the committee has 3 cities in Houston County, Centerville, Warner Robins, and Perry. If Centerville and Warner Robins wants to do it and Perry disagrees, then they can't get it done. They all have to agree and pass a resolution to that effect. And then it comes to the General Assembly for a local act to be passed.
Thank you.
Is there any other member of the committee that wishes to be heard on the matter before the committee? Especially anybody that was on the subcommittee that heard it to begin with. Is there anything else we need to know before we move forward? Chairman,
if I may, not to belabor the point, but the gentleman mentioned, and to Chairman Shim's question, the subcommittee did, and I believe the author agreed to it, the concerns seem to be from other convention areas around the state that while this was meant for Bibb County and Macon, that we were opening up an easy access that other people could do this, not this special situation where these halls of fame were being helped, if you will. The subcommittee modified it with the agreement of the author to again stress that all the cities in the county and the county must agree. It raised the bar. It made it harder for someone to use this new section of code. That's the reason it was done, because the gentleman brings it and he only intends it to be for Macon. It is certainly available for other folks, but all the cities and the county have to agree to do it and have to pass the legislation and then have to come back before this body. So I chaired that subcommittee meeting, and I think there was, I believe, unanimous support for the amendment. I'm not clear that there might have been one person that was opposed to the bill, but the amendment was widely supported and agreed to by the author to raise the bar so as to try not to affect other areas within the state.
That's helpful information. Any other member of the committee wish to be heard on the matter before the committee? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? I have a move to pass and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll have it in rules by 5 o'clock today, sir. Okay, I'm going to turn the chair over to the vice chairman. I got first readers. Let me just do it here. Okay, there you go. 1188.
Chairman O'Neill, if you will, at this time, will you bring forth House Bill 1188, first reader?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 1188 is a very simple four-line proposition that allows Commissioner of Revenue to appoint not more than 8 certified law enforcement officers as special agents to be authorized to enforce the criminal laws of this state as to the subject matter contained in the revenue title. Such agents shall have all the power of a peace officer when engaged in the enforcement of this title. That's all part of our comprehensive initiative of compliance, all 19 of our tax platforms, and once we have created the grandiose database that we're working on in several pilot projects and other places with integrated tax, we need the boots on the ground to go make sure the law gets enforced and maybe stop some of this feeling in the general public that we're too easy to cheat.
Any questions from members of the committee? Okay, hang on. Go ahead.
Yeah, Chairman O'Neill, I just I remember a couple of years ago, didn't we try to do this? And didn't this get hung up on the police powers of the agents in terms of their carry laws and things like that? I can't remember specifically, but this seems to give them those rights that they got hung up on a couple of years ago.
It is police power rights, and they have carry rights, and they're likely to be undercover. And the feeling a few years ago, it was a departmental bill, it was not my bill a few years ago, was that that may be a little bit too much power to give to the Revenue Department. The feeling these days is that the Revenue Department has not had enough power to do its job. They're criticized constantly because they're unable to collect taxes that are due to Georgia. They seem to be unable, based on all the studies and plans, to do what they need to do to identify those people that would cheat on their taxes. And so maybe that initiative that we tried 2 or 3 years ago to get some folks out there to change this subculture of corruption in tax was really a lot better idea than we thought it was at the time. So I'm bringing it back for debate again. I would love for the headline in every major newspaper to say tax cheats caught today, and send that message out to the general public so that maybe we're going to have people being more compliant. You know what? After that happens, we can all pay less, and we might get this economy turned back around too, and we can deal with our budget a lot better too.
Okay. Next, Chairman.
10.
Number 10, Roger. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed the bill calls for certified law enforcement officers, and I assume by that they're allowed to carry weapons. Is that part of that certification? And I think that probably is needed in some of the cases they are going out here to try to pursue.
I suspect they'll be undercover, and I certainly suspect they'll be vulnerable to violence as a matter of their duties. Yes, sir.
Number 14. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Chairman, I do remember this bill being a departmental bill a few years ago, and I had some concerns about it at the time, and I do agree that the concern over lost revenue from tax cheats is important. We definitely need to be doing everything we can to pursue them. What is it that prohibits the Department of Revenue from using GBI? This is just really is truly a question of just trying to understand why it is that they can't use GBI, State Patrol, other law enforcement agencies to enforce right now. Why is it that they would need independent policing powers?
I think it probably, I don't know that there's anything that precludes them from using GBI, but there's sort of, it sets up a maze of bureaucratic accomplishments before they can do that. When you share confidential tax information, for instance, with even other agencies within government, there's always the possibility of violating some confidential taxpayer privileges when you're dealing in this situation. The sophisticated nature of the operations, they're very, in most cases, what I'd call white collar, essentially. I mean, you almost need And I don't know, maybe our GBI has several agents like FBI does that are all CPAs. I mean, that's what FBI hires, are lawyers and CPAs. I don't know that for sure that we have the competencies, but I do know for sure that law and GBI can carry weapons and they can do the investigations. But I do know for a fact that if they came from revenue and they could do investigations and they could carry weapons and they could work undercover, they would know the subject matter probably better than a called-in agency. That's what I think, and I truly believe, and I think we're going to not have to be involved with getting somebody that maybe is not sophisticated in that particular area of law enforcement up to speed before they can be effective. I think this group of 8 could hit the ground running instantly and be a tremendous service to the state of Georgia in reversing this subcultural trend that I foresee that's out there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Chairman, we're going to send this to the Public Finance Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, if you will, bring us House Bill 1191.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This proposition, I think, was brought to me by the Clerks Association to clear up some ambiguities about our intangible taxes that are collected for the purpose of the committee's knowledge. An intangible tax is a tax that's collected on a mortgage. And there's been some confusion in the past where if you have a mortgage that's going to be attaching to property that might be in more than one county, which is where the intangible taxes are payable to the counties, how you allocate the tax between the counties. And what this bill does is it uses the tax assessor's appraised values to determine a ratio, and the ratio will be applied to the amount of intangible tax that's due on the transaction and paid out to the counties accordingly. I hope this will receive the support of the folks with ACCG. It's not under, I don't know that they've even seen it yet. It's been the clerks that have brought it, but I hope we find out in the debate that this will solve some problems in the past that they have been dealing with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any members of the committee have any questions? Seeing none, we will send this to the Public Finance Subcommittee also. Mr. Chairman, you have another bill, House Bill 1191.
1190. I just finished 91. It's 92.
92, excuse me. I'm sorry. Next one in line.
And really, 91 and 92 almost could have been done together, except that 92 deals with the transfer tax. Whenever you have a real estate transaction, there's a $1 per thousand in value transfer tax that's charged to record the deed. Same situation if the property's in more than one county, how that tax is allocated between the counties. The proportion would be, again, the assessed values. They might not necessarily be the market values, but the assessed values in either of the two venues would be used to develop a proportion, and the tax would be paid according to the affected counties.
Any questions of the chairman? Seeing none, this also will be placed in the Public Finance Subcommittee. I think that's all. Mr. Chairman, I think you should leave it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, 20th day, we've made it this far. I can't tell you how gratified I am to see this many of your faces here. I mean, still working through some really, really sometimes confusing and heady stuff. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate everybody's input from all sides of every issue and how important that is, especially these days facing the kind of economic crisis that we are. I hope you noticed today I'm trying to get a little more input at every meeting, and I hope it. And I want to say this for this reason only: it's never my intention to embarrass anybody before this committee. So if I ask you how you think about something or what you think about something, please don't take that as a challenge. And if for any reason that you don't want to respond, I'll respect that. I'm not doing it to draw attention to anybody. But I do want to draw out as much knowledge as we go through these matters as I possibly can. I'm very proud of this committee. Most of you are absolutely hand-picked, and you bring an experience to this committee from various areas of your vocations and your experiences that are vital to the process. So I hope I apologize in advance if I ever offend anybody by calling on you, but I'm going to be expecting a lot more input from you all as we go forward. We still have something like 200 matters in this committee. Our subcommittees are working hard, and we're working hard through it. But I just want to be able to pridefully say every time a bill of ours goes on the floor, at least all of us knows everything there is about it and could go in the well if we had to and talk about it and why we passed it if we did. And I appreciate y'all's input. Is there any member of the committee that has anything to bring before we adjourn? Thank you again for your committed service. We stand adjourned.
Members of the Sales Tax Committee will be convening a meeting of the Sales Tax Subcommittee shortly. So if you could stick around, we just have one bill to hear. Shouldn't take long. Thank you very much. Sales tax. Does it say 11:30 or does it say upon adjournment?